William H. Bernstein,
David M. Beret,
David Shelby Berry,
Joseph John Berry,
William Reed Bethke,
Yanene Bitru,
Timothy D.
Having just
Betterly,
heard from Bruce Springsteen, who was so essential to the recovery spiritually of New York and New Yorkers and all those in the tri-state area, we just wanted to let our viewers in on what we've been watching. This is the reading of the names, which has become a yearly tradition.
I'm sure it's the names of the people that died in the trade towers.
Long and exhaustive and such an emotional time every year, 2,700 names here in New York. We also wanted to show you the start of the service at the Pentagon and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. All of these events are happening concurrently. They all mark different times, and sadly, the times we're talking about are impacts of aircraft and the loss of so many souls. And Nicole, Jeff Bennett, our correspondent in Shanksville, is standing by with Colonel Chris Whalen, and his cousin Richard Guadagno died on Flight 93 when it impacted there. Jeff?
Hey, Brian, that's right. Richard Guadagno was among those 40 American heroes. As you talk about the ceremonies underway in New York at the Pentagon and here in Shanksville, we were expecting the ceremony here to start at around 9:45 Eastern. That's the moment at which the passengers and crew aboard the flight 20 years ago started their attack on that cockpit as a means of bringing that plane down. Vice President Kamala Harris will deliver the keynote address, Brian and Nicole, and her office just moments ago released an excerpt from her speech, and she'll say, "What happened on Flight 93 tells us so much about the courage of those on board who gave everything, about the resolve of the first responders who risked everything, about the resilience of the American people." And Brian, as you mentioned, I'm joined here by Army Colonel Chris Whalen. Your cousin, Richard, was among those folks who, on that day, they took a stand for freedom. They took a stand that cost their lives.
Absolutely. It was truly an amazing moment that, they democratically voted to take action together, knowing that they probably wouldn't survive. And they took what we know later to be the very first steps against what was a long war on terror.
On this day, we are reflecting and focusing a lot on the ways in which your family members, so many other family members, were taken from us. What was Richard like when he was here?
I'm sorry. So when he was here, yes, Richard was a lover of all things outdoors. Fish and wildlife was his chosen career, loved to grow things in his garden, cook. He loved to play guitar and actually built some of his own guitars to play. So whatever Richard did, he did with a great passion, which I didn't know him very well as I was much younger than him and didn't live nearby, but the stories from his sister and his parents later on just kind of painted a great story of him, and I wish I'd known him better because it seems like whatever he did with great love and gusto.
We were talking earlier about how now there are generations in your family of people who are committed to making sure that all of America remembers the sacrifice that your cousin and those folks aboard that flight committed that day.
Yeah, so I'm involved with the Flight 93 Friends group at the park here, which I really like working with them to make the park a better place. And my son is 9, and he wasn't nearly even a thought when 9/11 happened, but we're committed to making sure we're involved here for generations to come, so that he'll be involved here when my wife and I are long gone as well. This area is not New York City. It's not the Pentagon, which were the financial and military capitals of the nation. So you need to come here and be deliberate about it. So we want people to remember this site and these 40 passengers for their actions, as much as the New York and Washington, D.C. locations.
How much of that is a concern for you and the other family members, that people might forget what happened here?
I think it's always in the back of our minds because there weren't many people here, and it's not as big a deal, and it is far away. But I think this park is beautiful. As I was telling you earlier, Richard, who loved the outdoors, would do whatever
Looks like
he
a gorgeous park
for the right thing, which was Flight 93 and the actions they took. But he'd be pleased and honored to know that the strip mine that was here is now a beautiful thousands of acre national park where there's such great wildlife, animals, and everything else. So I really encourage Americans and anybody to come and see the park, not only for its story of Flight 93 and the heroes there, but also the beauty that it is here.
Can you help us understand the sort of the journey, the committed collective effort involved in bringing this memorial
Look at that,
together
that's
for
awesome.
the first decade? The memorial as it exists now, that was not here. It was really a makeshift effort of locals and family members making the trip out here to do what they could to pay tribute to their loved ones.
It was. I mean, I came here my first year, 2 or 3 years after, and it was only a chain link fence on a hill, not a lot to see, and a makeshift temporary memorial with the bell they have to to honor and ring them during the reading of names. And it's changed over the years to the wall with the flight path, and then the visitors center, which has a lot of the history in there as well, and then finally the Tower of Voices, which I know you were at a couple years ago when that was dedicated. So it has been a long vision from the local people, who I am very much appreciative of, those who gave their land up, the locals who helped design and support the memorial, the locals who support the Friends group now, and state, local, federal government for all of their work they committed to making this park, the National Park Service, who runs the site very well, and then of course the private fundraisers and donors who gave of their time and money so this could be a reality.
You were talking earlier, and you said that Chris's father, who's now 97, is here.
Richard's father.
I'm sorry?
Richard's father.
Right, his father, who's 97 years old, is here for the ceremonies today. How has his loss resonated in your family over the last 20 years?
I mean, I think it's I only have one child and he's alive, but you can't imagine losing your son and outliving your son and having to do that for a generation past. So I know it's very hard for him to see and remember every year here. And it's hard for us to watch that in him and his daughter, Richard's sister Lori, and see the grief they have even now. But I think that in some ways makes us more resolved to make sure we don't forget and that everyone collectively remembers the 40 here.
Yeah, absolutely, a moment of remembrance and reflection indeed. Brian, Nicole?
Jeff Bennett, thank you so much, and thank you, Colonel Chris Whalen. We now have a chance to bring into our coverage someone special. On the morning of September 11th, President George W. Bush was visiting a class of second graders at Emma E. Booker Elementary School.
He was in Florida.
Sarasota, Florida. President Bush was reading the children's book, The Pet Goat, when the second plane struck the World Trade Center just after 9 o'clock. In a pivotal, what would become definitional moment captured by the cameras, the president's chief of staff, Andrew Card, approached President Bush and whispered in his ear that America was under attack. We're joined now by two of the people who were in the room on that fateful morning. Andy Card, former chief of staff to President Bush, and Lazaro DeBrock, one of the second grade students at Emma Booker Elementary School 20 years ago. He's now a chemical engineer. Thank you both so much for being here. Andy, what do you remember about that moment and that day?
I knew I was delivering a message that was a very rare message, and the venue was completely disconnected from the magnitude of the message.
Right.
Walking into a classroom of second graders in front of a press pool where you really couldn't have a conversation, and the complete innocence of those second graders, it was just surreal. Normally, a president would be getting a message in the Oval Office or be woken up in the middle of the night, and it wouldn't have been one person going in, it would have been 2 or 3 people, and there would have been a discussion. I knew that what I was about to say to him would change his presidency. I also knew that it was a dramatic moment. It's an iconic photograph. I am not iconic, but that picture does define an era, and those students responded so well. I've kind of followed some of the students since those days and had the privilege over the last few days to actually connect with a couple of them, and they had 2 different views of what had happened, and I just think that's entirely appropriate. Mm-hmm. And it's good for them to tell their story as to how they either felt emotionally engaged or they were wondering what was going on and felt as if they weren't being told. So but it's critically important that those students that were there tell students that are in the second grade right now what it was like.
I want to bring one such student in. Lazaro, you chose New York City to study, to go to college because of a connection you felt to that day and this spot. Talk about how that sort of was an inflection point, maybe. I don't know, if you're 7, can you have an inflection point? Just talk about that day and how it altered your course.
Yeah, I mean, that day was critically important to the development of my adult life. I've mentioned it before that day, 9/11, is honestly one of the earliest moments in my life where you kind of realize how big the world is. So I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, pretty much my whole life. And for me, the world at the age of 7 was my home, the road to M.E. Booker, and obviously the school itself. And I remember the day of the attack, we become a little bit more aware. I knew what New York City was, but the World Trade Center, I think, was completely unknown to me. So we're made aware of these attacks. We're made aware that the world's a little bit bigger place, and we're made aware that America is more vulnerable than what we were led to believe. And that in me inspired almost a sort of, I wouldn't say adventurous, but a curiosity to see the rest of the world. I mean, in my adult life, I've lived and moved in at least 4 different cities. And that is something that I do not want to discontinue. And that is a result of that day, right? It inspires you and kind of makes you realize that the world's a lot bigger place than your house and your school.
Lazaro, what do you remember from the moment when Andy Card walked in and told the president? Could you hear what he said? I know you didn't know at the time when it happened, the president didn't even know, but he made some remarks before he left your school. When did it sink in what was going on?
So I didn't hear what he said. I was in the back left row. There was 2 rows of chairs that were set in front of the president, and I was in the back left of there. You can kind of see me sometimes in the footage. I didn't hear what he said, but so the way we were reading to the president was in taking turns reading passages to him of Betco. So each student is picked upon to read a passage to him. I wasn't a very good reader and wasn't very good at following along, so I was oftentimes pretty distracted trying to catch up. The moment Andrew Card actually walked in, because he walked in close to me, I actually noticed him walking in and I saw him whispering into the president's ear. So that moment that is constantly relived in images and TVs is something that I watched in live. I saw the president's gaze kind of veer off for a little bit. And it's almost like he mentally loses himself for just for a moment before recomposing himself, and briefly coming back to the classroom. So I saw that. I remember being slightly confused, and almost thinking to myself, either he had to go to the bathroom or he was losing himself in the reading, kind of like I was. So it was almost amusing in that way. We didn't find out about the attack until after he had left. And we were explained as to why he had to cut his meeting short. So he was there to read to multiple classrooms. Mrs. Daniels was just the first of many classrooms that he was to read to, and we were confused as to why he had to cut his meeting short. We were made aware of the attacks shortly after he left, though.
I love your description of yourself as a student. You've obviously gone on to huge things in your life. I want to ask you, Andy, there's no aspect of President Bush's presidency has gone without harsh scrutiny, including this moment. Can you tell us what was on his mind?
Well, when I whispered in his ear, I truly believed that he was reflecting on the burden that he now had to carry. And I say this sincerely. I believe that's the moment he became the president. He took the oath of office January 20th at noontime, but his mind was thinking about his inaugural address and the agenda that he wanted to accomplish as president. When I whispered into his ear, I honestly believe he reflected on, I have a job to do, a unique job. I have a unique oath that I took, and it is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and all of us. So I really believe that he stepped up to the expectation that a president has. And what we have.
Well, what people remember is too, like, you know, he became a wartime president as well too. He had to make decisions to attack Al Qaeda in Afghanistan.
Decisions out of emotion. He was
wasn't expected to do that, but he became a wartime president.
I was very impressed when we got.
I think that's one reason why he got elected for a second term, because how he handled the country in 9/11.
Know that we are not looking to go to war with him, and he shouldn't react in any negative way. We've got to be in this together.
Yep.
No one told him to do it. He told me to get President Putin on the phone, and bingo, that happened. So I'm grateful for the way.